Why did the Queen of Sheba visit Solomon, and what did she say about him? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Chronicles on walking through the Bible.
Glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verses 1 to 12, but before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verse 1, but if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Chronicles chapter 9, beginning at verse 1. Now when the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to Jerusalem to test Solomon with hard questions, having a very great retinue, camels that bore spices, gold in abundance, and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she spoke with him about all that was in her heart. So Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing so difficult for Solomon that he could not explain it to her. And when the Queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his servants, the service of his waiters and their apparel, his cupbearers and their apparel, and his entryway by which he went up to the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. Then she said to the king, "It was a true report which I heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom. However, I did not believe their words until I came and saw with my own eyes, and indeed the half of the greatness of your wisdom was not told me. You exceed the fame of which I heard. Happy are your men, and happy are these your servants, who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God, who delighted in you, setting you on his throne to be king for the Lord your God. Because your God has loved Israel, to establish them forever, therefore he made you king over them, to do justice and righteousness. And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, spices in great abundance, and precious stones. There never were any spices such as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Also the servants of Hiram and the servants of Solomon, who brought gold from Ophir, brought algum wood and precious stones. And the king made walkways of algum wood for the house of the Lord and for the king's house, also harps and stringed instruments for singers. And there were none such as these seen before in the land of Judah. Now King Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba all she desired, whatever she asked, much more than she had brought to the king. So she turned and went to her own country, she and her servants. Here in chapter 9, we get one of the famous stories from the time of King Solomon, the visit of the Queen of Sheba. We do not know exactly when this story takes place, but from her viewing of the buildings that he built in Jerusalem, it must have been after those were built, meaning that at a minimum we are 25 years into Solomon's reign, but likely further than that. That Solomon is still worshiping the Lord and still enjoying the wealth that God blessed him with also shows us that we're likely closer to the 25-year mark of his reign than we are to the 35-year mark of his reign. A lot of ink has been spilled trying to come up with where exactly Sheba is, as we aren't exactly certain. Jesus refers to this woman as the Queen of the South in Matthew 12:42, but all that does for us is tell us that she comes from a place south of Israel. There are some who place it in East Africa, maybe near Ethiopia, while others place it in southern Arabia, perhaps near Yemen. From what the Queen of Sheba brings to Solomon, it seems to make much more sense that she is from southern Arabia, but since the Bible doesn't say, and we can't prove it via some archaeological find, we shouldn't be dogmatic of it. What we are certain of is that this queen came from afar because she had heard of the famous Solomon concerning his wisdom. Now the question is, how might she have heard, especially if she was from farther away? After all, she did not have internet, television, or even the mail system we have today. Let's recall from the end of chapter 9 that Solomon had developed a fleet that went sailing to different places, gathering riches and trade. When these ships came to port, the seamen would tell people where they were from and what life was like back in their country in order to create relationships suitable for trading. And once these relationships were established, word of mouth could get going and spread the information further. Solomon's fame, his wisdom, his wealth, and power came to the ears of the Queen of Sheba, and so she decided that she had to see it for herself. Thus she came to Jerusalem with quite the entourage, along with camels bearing spices, gold, and precious stones to give to Solomon as a show of her generosity. But the reason for her visit was not just to see the wealth of Solomon, but to hear the wisdom of Solomon. So she posed him some difficult questions that only someone truly wise could answer. Now, we don't know what these questions were, but needless to say, Solomon passed the test. There was nothing too difficult for Solomon to be able to explain to her. And then, of course, add to that all of the great buildings in Jerusalem that Solomon had built and the wealth that he possessed, and she came to the conclusion that the Lord must be with him. And of course, all of those things did happen because of the Lord's blessings. But when judging for ourselves today, we must remember that the rain falls on the just and the unjust. Just because someone is rich or powerful or famous does not necessarily mean the Lord is with them. Now, the Lord might be, for he does bless people, but it doesn't necessarily make it so. When it came to Solomon's wisdom, the Queen of Sheba came to the only conclusion she could. It had to be from God, leading her to conclude that the rest was from God too. May we have the same type of discernment on our part as well. The queen tells Solomon that she had heard of his wisdom from afar, but even then, until she came to see it personally, she didn't believe it. But now, having seen it, she exclaims that in reality, what had been told of her wasn't even half of it. That's how far and beyond the wisdom of Solomon was. So it was that the Queen of Sheba exchanged lavish gifts with Solomon, as royalty so often does, and she departed for home. As we said earlier, though, her presence here is mentioned by Jesus as a judgment against the people of his day. For this queen traveled from the ends of the earth a great distance to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And behold, a wiser man than Solomon was present with them then, and people wouldn't even travel a short distance to hear him, the him being Jesus. Such a sad statement, but true, and it is even true today. In the next lesson, we're going to be examining the wealth of Solomon during his reign before the book gives us the conclusion of Solomon's reign. So we hope that you'll return for that. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verses 13 to 31, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.